Thank you for joining Session C of our 2020 Western Canada Quality and Business Excellence Conference hosted by ASQ Vancouver. We will begin at 12:30.
A warm welcome to our next session. I am Santosh from ASQ Vancouver leadership team. I now have the privilege to introduce our speaker, Hugh Alley. Hugh is an industrial engineer and author. He has spent his career improving operational processes, mostly in the manufacturing as well as 5 years in the public sector. He has worked in a wide variety of industries across North America as a business owner, employee, and consultant. Hugh has trained almost 1,000 frontline leaders, primarily using training within the industry approach. He helps companies achieve the significant performance gains in 3 to 6 months while improving the skills of the leadership team. To know Hugh a little better, his first job after earning his engineering degree was designing sailing yachts. Maybe if he would have continued, he would be globetrotting in his yachts today. Hugh has worked in 6 provinces and 3 territories in Canada and has visited every province and territory. I don't think many of us can equal that record. About the topic, about grade 9 science, how it can help you rethink your opportunities. Hugh will set the stage to show the need for a new way of thinking and introduce all of us to the 5 questions of Kata. He will then report on the results from the 2 local organizations that have used this approach to solve difficult problems and achieved significant improvements in quality in a very short period. Over to you, Hugh. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Santosh. I really appreciate the introduction. I'm going to share my screen with you now as we begin this presentation. So, as Santosh said, I'm an author, a consultant. I've taught core skills to over 900 frontline leaders. And I help companies achieve significant performance gains in 3 to 6 months while improving the skills of the leadership team. I want to acknowledge that I'm presenting to you and honored to live and work on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Musqueam and Squamish nations. This is what we're going to cover. I'm going to start by making the case that we need a new way of thinking to address the opportunities that are out there in the world. And I want to show you how the 5 questions of the Toyota Kata help us meet that need. Then I'm going to tell you about results from a couple of local businesses, Life Labs and West Tech Windows, where we applied these methods and got some really remarkable results. I'll spend a little bit of time talking about the structure of the Toyota Kata, and then we'll talk about how you could use this to move ahead. So we need a new way of thinking. The market needs us to improve. They need us to be able to turn on a dime, to deal with all the details, to deal with demanding customers. And the market's pretty insistent, but it can be done. And the image here is face shields that were developed and produced by a local company in the Vancouver area by a company called Packrite. They went from nothing to a new product in 4 weeks. That's the kind of responsiveness that the market needs us to improve, needs from us. But if you look at how we improve now, there are a couple of things that we do. One is, as this image shows, we ask the question, well, what can we improve? And we go on to the next great idea about how we could improve things. The difficulty with this is that it often is scattered in terms of the direction. It doesn't actually move us forward. The other thing that happens is that we practice business as usual, and then every now and again, we do an event, an improvement event, typically led by specialists. And so in essence, what we're doing is practicing business as usual, and improvement is led by others. Neither of these approaches stick in terms of lasting improvement, and none of them really give the market what it's asking for. So what else can we do? Well, there's been a laundry list of things that have been suggested. So you've probably seen many of these: demand-driven MRP, TQM, theory of constraints, Six Sigma, lean. And if you go down the lean path, you've got advocates for 5S and Hijunka and Poka-yoke and value stream mapping and one-piece flow, Kanban. These are all interesting tools, but fundamentally, all of these approaches start with the wrong question. They're tools. They are the equivalent of a hammer. And you need a hammer to build a house, but if all you have is a hammer, you're going to have a very weird house. So we've got all these tools, but not a way to think about how we use them. And that's what we need. And this is where grade 9 science comes in. So I'm sure many of you will remember your grade 9 science teacher. For me, it's Fred Speed. Thank you, Fred. And he drummed into us this scientific method. Ask a question, do some research, state your hypothesis, run an experiment, observe the outcomes, and draw some conclusions and say, have I answered the question? A very sound, proven method. And it has several advantages. It goes in a direction because you're fundamentally trying to solve a problem or answer a question. It helps you learn about the system that you're exploring. The thing about doing experiments and using the scientific method is they're all small bets. You're always just tinkering a little bit at the edge to say, well, if I change this variable, will I get a different result? data supports action. So at each stage in the scientific method, you've learned a little bit more, so then you can experiment in a new direction or carry it on a little further. Scientific experimentation is repeatable. You know that you can, because it's controlled, you'll get the same result the next time. Scientific method has relatively modest claims. It doesn't claim to solve all the problems of the world in one fell swoop. It simply says, well, I've now concluded that I know that if I change this process variable, I'm going to get this change in outcome. And that's about as far as the scientific method lets you go. And finally, the scientific method is wonderful about preventing blind assumptions. There are assumptions, but you state them up front. And so all of these are really substantial advantages when you think about trying to improve business systems or make improvements in your work. These are really nice things to have on your side. So, is there a place for science in our business? Well, I want to read you a quote from Stephen Spear and Kent Brown, who did a whole bunch of research on 20 or 30 Toyota companies. So here's what they wrote in an article called Decoding the DNA of the Toyota Production System. They said, we found that for outsiders, the key is to understand that the Toyota production system creates a community of scientists. Whenever Toyota defines a specification, it is establishing sets of hypotheses that can then be tested. In other words, it is following the scientific method. To make any changes, Toyota uses a rigorous problem-solving process that requires a detailed assessment of the current state of affairs and a plan for improvement that is, in effect, an experimental test of the proposed changes. With anything less than such scientific rigor, change at Toyota would amount to little more than random trial and error, a blindfolded walk through life. This is an amazing quote. And when you think about it, how many of us have lived through some senior person saying, we're going to try this initiative, and they have no idea how that's going to work. They don't seem to have thought through the details. It becomes a blindfolded walk through life. We need something different. And that scientific method seems to me to be promising. So how could we learn it? Well, Mike Rother, a professor at University of Michigan, has his hypothesis that the Toyota Kata, which I'll talk about in a moment, is a practical way that an organization can learn and internalize scientific thinking. So here's a quick poll for you. I'd like you to tell me what you think is a kata. Is it a pattern, a standard, a practice, a form to be emulated, or all of the above? So I'm going to give you 30 seconds to put your response in, and we'll see what the poll comes out with. 30 seconds is about the time of the Jeopardy theme song. So you can have that rolling around in your head as you enter your answers, and I'll be quiet while you make up your mind.
Five seconds to close the poll.
Thank you. Thanks, Tracy Ann. So almost 2/3 of you answered all of the above, and you are exactly correct. Kata is a Japanese word, and it, like many Japanese words, not an easy translation to English, lots of nuances. but it is a pattern. It's a standard, something you can hold up as to see, does it match? And so if we look at, hang on a second, we'll get there, on to the next slide. Or if you've ever watched Karate Kid, he does wax on, wax off, learning this pattern that he's learning. And if any of you have done martial arts, you'll recognize the word kata as the practice routine that you learn to master a core skill. And the thing about martial arts people is they learn the kata not because they want to be able to repeat that, but they want to be able to draw on them at will when they get into sparring. And so Mike Rother's thought is, if we can learn a pattern of asking questions that he's built into this Toyota Kata, it can help us master scientific mindset in our work. And so there are two parts to this, an improvement kata that has 4 steps and a coaching kata that has 5 questions. And we're going to look at both of those now. So the scientific method matches very nicely the Toyota Kata. So you've got ask a question is understand the challenge. Research is grasp the current condition. State your hypothesis is set a target condition. Run an experiment is experiment to overcome obstacles. Observe the outcomes is when can we go and see what we have learned? And then we reflect to say, have we answered the question? Or in Toyota Kata terms, have we met our target condition or challenge? And so here's the card that Mike has put together. Understand the challenge, grasp the current question, then we set the next target condition, and then we experiment to reach that target condition, overcoming obstacles as we do. The coaching questions show up here, helping us through the experimenting process. And they ask us, what's the target condition? What are we shooting for? What's the actual condition now? What obstacles do we think are preventing us from reaching the target condition? And which one are you addressing now? What is your next step? And how quickly can we go and see what we have learned? So a very tight linkage between these two different practices. So let's unpack the 5 questions. The target condition sets out not only what we want the performance to be, but what we think the process should run like. So it says, if we perform the work in this pattern and we set our process variables in this way, we think we're going to generate this follow-on performance. So it demands of you to set some expectation. The actual condition pushes the practitioner to really understand how things work now. And the obstacles are all the things that you have in mind that you think might be preventing you. One of the interesting parts of this is that they ask, which one are you addressing now? And maybe you remember from grade 9 science that you only change one variable at a time when you're doing an experiment. The problem is that if you change more than one thing, you don't really know which was the thing that made the difference. Then we think about what's our next step and always answer the question, what do we expect? Because every time we are going into an experiment, it's because we think there's going to be a change. And finally, we ask, how quickly can we go and see? That's important because we want to drive high frequency of experiments. We want this to become a daily practice. I had one client, and I was asking him about, well, how long, when do you think we can see what you've learned? And he said, well, I think we'll know in a month for sure. And I said, well, if we looked at the data in 2 weeks, do you think that would tell us? And he said, oh yeah, absolutely. I said, would we get any more in 2 weeks than we'd have in a week? And he said, I'm not sure. And he said, okay, so in a week we'd know. And he said, oh yeah, I think so. I said, what about 3 days? So we had moved from a month down to 3 days. Think about what that means in terms of the speed of learning as you adjust to business situations, or in terms of the speed of improving quality as you work your way through the things that are affecting that. So, so we've got this. The other side of this coaching card, the Kata card that he has, is that for the questions for the coach to ask, reflecting on the last step that the improver has taken, because you don't actually know what the result of the step will be. And so you ask, what did you plan as your last step, just to remind ourselves of the experiment, and what did you expect? Because you should have been expecting something. And then you say, what actually happened? And you look, did it match? And what did you learn from that? So those are the two big elements of this. And so what we're trying to do here is to move from this pattern that we've seen so many times, or many of us have, where we have business as usual interrupted by occasional events led by experts. And I'm just curious, a poll, how many of you have experienced this kind of improvement effort? So Tracy Ann, if you could open up the poll, please. Just answer, I'll give you 20 seconds or so. How many times have you experienced business as usual with occasional improvement events?
Okay, you have 5 seconds now. I'll give 5 more.
All right, thanks.
All right, yes. All right, I'll go ahead and close the poll now.
Thank you.
Okay.
So this is very much what I would have expected. That, well, we've got 60% of people have seen this pattern many times, and almost everyone else has seen it at least occasionally. It's a pretty common experience. But what we want to do is move away from that toward this pattern, where what we're seeing is daily improvement, that the pattern becomes daily improvement. So here are a couple of examples that I want to share with you from work that I've done with clients, and they're fine with me sharing this information. So Life Labs wanted to reduce the waiting time of their clients, and in a 13-week period, we did 14 experiments and achieved a 45% reduction in wait time. We didn't spend a penny. It was driven entirely by ideas from staff. And we did daily experiments every day. I say daily experiments. We did daily debriefs to understand what was happening in the experiments. And we'd say, what can we learn from this? Do we need to stop? We had one experiment that we did for half a day and realized it was going so badly that we needed to abandon it right away. But this was the advantage of this daily routine, is we could make a change, explore the impact and make a decision very quickly. And we were able, you can see in this chart, we started with 34 days average waiting time, or 34 minutes average waiting time. And by the time we got to the end, we were bopping around 14 or 15 minutes of waiting time. Massive improvement for zero money in terms of investment by the company. That's the kind of improvement you can get with this rigorous experimenting using the Toyota Kata model. Here's another one, Westech Windows and Doors. We set the challenge as a 75% reduction in rework in 6 months. And we set out challenges for the 6 team leads and supervisors, and they had varying degrees of success, but they did daily experiments for over a period of 20 weeks, so less than 5 months, and achieved an 85% reduction in rework. And these graphs are just some of portions of it. So here are 3 months, the paint line went from over 30 NCRs a week down to under 5. The CNC operation went from 5 NCRs a week to less than 1. These are big improvements, and it really made a difference in the costs for that company and for their ability to deliver on time because their rework was going down. So,
Hugh, last 5 minutes, please.
Okay, thank you. So those are examples of what can be done, what can be achieved. So the work has 3 parts of the Toyota Kata. There's an improver whose job is to say, how can we improve the standard using the model? The coach's job is to ask the question, is the improvement being done according to the standard? And the second coach is looking at the coach's work and saying, can the improvement process be improved? So what does it take? Well, when established, the coaching cycles take about 10 to 12 minutes each, and the improvement work should be sized so that it takes 15 to 20 minutes in a day. In the early stages, the coaching cycle can be a little bit longer, as much as 25 minutes, but good coaches will time box that and keep it manageable. So how could you start? And this is the last part of the presentation. What could you do to start using this? Well, you can ask these questions as you go into meetings. Ask, what are we trying to achieve in this meeting? Then ask, where are we now? What's the performance now? What's our process now? What is our next target? What's in our way? That's kind of the what are the obstacles question. What is our next step or experiment? And how soon can we see the result? These are the Toyota Kata questions in dressed up to be really easy to take in. And you could apply these without ever telling anybody that you're doing Toyota Kata. And it's a wonderful way to bring that rigor of scientific mindset into your organization. It becomes a tool to rethink possibilities. The second thing about starting is you start by acknowledging that you actually don't know how to get there. After all, if you are here and you want to get to be there or here, you got to travel some distance. The problem is that if we already knew how to do it, we'd do it. The issue is we don't know how to get there, and we need to be able to acknowledge that, and then we can address the obstacles and get through this unclear territory, this unknown. A couple of tips. Try doing it yourself before you do it with others. So you could look at using this model to look at how you handle email or how you do things so that they're delivered on time, or your response time to requests for help. I had coached one person whose starting Kata effort was they wanted to lose some weight. I know of somebody who used this to help them learn how to leave the house on time every morning, or to estimate the time to complete a task. Second, have a coach and be a coach. That coaching process helps you learn. Third thing, set short target conditions, 2 to 4 weeks. If you set anything longer, it'll look overwhelming. Enjoy the success of meeting a 2 to 4 week target, and work on it daily. The experience is that people who work on this once a week just don't succeed. A caution about the Kata. If you're doing the Toyota Kata differently from the card in 3 months, it's a problem. What you need to do is master the card, which is really a starter Kata, before you adapt it. Think about the martial arts. You need to practice the routine and the moves so that they're embedded and ingrained before you start sparring. The second thing, caution, is that if you're not doing it differently in 3 years, it's a problem too. Just like the Karate Kid, wax on and wax off. If you're still doing wax on, wax off 3 years after starting, you're not learning enough. You haven't mastered the pattern or adapted it to your situation. So cautions on both sides. Involve the frontline leaders as the people doing the improvement, the team leaders or supervisors or charge hands, whatever they're called, and their team, because they do the work. Their direct managers are most threatened by the change. They're going to have the biggest difficulty with it because you're shifting their work from giving the answers to becoming a coach. And that's a hard transition to make. And you also need the C-suite, whether it's the GM or the vice president or the director, because if they don't drive the change, it's not going to be sustained. In summary, Toyota Kata is a reliable way to introduce the scientific mindset, the scientific method into your business activities. And that method provides a fundamental approach that lets you rethink your opportunities and get remarkably large changes done remarkably quickly. It shifts the improvement effort from a series of intermittent events that are led by so-called experts to become an ongoing activity that are done by everybody in the organization. The Toyota Kata is easy to get started, even if you just ask those questions that I laid out in the presentation at your regular meetings. But there's lots to master through practice. And you can get significant and rapid gains in performance. It lets you rethink your opportunities. Grade 9 science to the rescue. There are lots of resources available. These are books that are sort of core of the current thinking about how to do this. I rely on the practice guide regularly. There are some websites here that you can look at, and there's a host of information available in all of them. You'll be able to look at these when you watch the recording of this talk, and you can contact me either at the email there Hugh at becomingthesupervisor.com, which is the website for my book, or there's a phone number. And I do Kata coaching and skill development to help organizations achieve significant performance gains. So feel free to reach out to me if you have questions or wondering how to get started. And that's the presentation. And Santosh, I'll send it back to you and welcome your questions.
Thank you very much, Hugh. That was quite a bit on Kata. So we have some questions. I will just start reviewing the question and come back to you. So
Okay.
the first question is, could Kata work at the society level? If the question is, for example, will wearing a mask reduce the impact of COVID-19 on Canadians?
So absolutely, it can work at the society level. At least I don't see any reason why it wouldn't. I am not aware of anybody who has tried it at that level. I know that there are a lot of folks who are exploring using Kata in the classroom, and it's being used I know it's been presented in literally thousands of classrooms across North America and Europe. But there's no reason you couldn't do an experiment to see whether wearing a mask would reduce the impact of COVID-19.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
The next question, of course, this is a general question. Would you like to share the slides with ASQ?
Oh, I believe they're part. Yes, they will be shared.
Okay, yeah. So that was a quick short one.
Yep.
Next one is from Henry. Could you please give us a real example of Toyota Kata hypothesis?
Sure. So I'll use an example from the Life Labs project. So what we realized is that when staff were doing their jobs, they were prioritizing their tasks differently. So if there's task 1, 2, and 3 to be done, some staff would do task 2 first always, some would always go to task 1 first, and some would go to task 3. And we said, we have a hypothesis that if we had everyone using the same set of priorities, we would get better results. And so we got the crew together. There were 6 staff in that unit, and they came to an agreement about what priority sequence the tasks should be in for each of the roles in that particular business setting. And so then they started using that, and they saw that they did get better results. And then they said, well, we noticed, so this is the observation, they observed that in certain circumstances, people were left waiting longer. And they said, we have a hypothesis that if we change the order in our agreed list, we'll get better performance. There'll be less waiting. And so they changed it and tested it out. And in fact, it did improve things. And then they did another test because they observed another problem with that situation in the results. And they said, well, what if we changed the priorities this way? We think that might help. And so they changed them again, the priorities of the tasks. And that one, things got worse. So they learned something. So they went back to the first one. And over a period of about 10 tries, they were able to settle on a priority list that they were all absolutely comfortable with, was the most effective at reducing the waiting time. So I hope that answers the question.
Thank you. The next one is it's a question. It says, is the end goal of practicing kata becoming a coach?
No, is the short answer.
Yeah.
So, because it depends what you want to do. There are lots of folks who are really happy just working in their area, improving their little bit of the world. And so the end goal of practicing the Toyota Kata is to improve the world around you. And if you are inclined to become a coach, then great. That will be a valuable thing and a valuable contribution. But there's just as much value from someone who is working in their role, in their corner of their organization, just steadily improving it.
Okay, thank you very much. The next question is, would you be able to highlight some key challenges to implementing kata apart from leader support, which is always there?
Yep. Okay, sure. So when I think about the people that I have coached over the years, I think there are three things that people have a hard time with. And I've already pointed at one of them, is they tend to make their experiments too big. They make the targets, they set the targets too far out, and they make the experiments too big. And that just slows people down. So you don't get the repetitions that let you get good.
Absolutely.
The second thing that I would say is that people are, and I think it's a North American thing, I think we're just anxious to get on and do something rather than to go and really understand the current situation. And I can't think how many times I'll meet with somebody I'm coaching and say, so tell me a little more about this aspect of the current condition of how things are now. And they'll scratch their head and say, oh, hadn't thought about that. And so people are very quick to skip over understanding how the world is now before they want to get to the experiments.
Okay.
And the third thing I would say is that people they want to try something without the discipline of saying, what do we actually expect the result to be? If you change the way you install the glass from this to this, how many pieces less glass are we going to break? You want to be that specific, and people skip that.
Okay, thank you. There's another question which is related, which says, your thoughts on developing a sustainable kata culture. It's a big one, I know, but you can give us some tips.
Yeah. So culture, in my experience, and all I can do is talk about my experience. Culture takes a long time to change. In 3 years, if you get the culture kind of generally jostled around to a different way of thinking, that's pretty good. But it wouldn't be sustainable after 3 years. I think you're going to have to look at an organization that is probably running with a new model like this for 5 or 6 years before it's really going to be so embedded that it would be hard for someone coming in to dismantle it. So it really takes long-term vision and sustained effort. One of the things that's nice, though, is that the model of the scientific mindset that's embedded in the Toyota Kata is something that you can apply to all the work you do within your area of influence. So if you're running a department, that can be how you run that department, and you can sustain it as long as you're going after that. Because it doesn't take a long time every day. And what happens is you start getting results that people notice. So,
yeah, I think the time is up. So I'll just wrap it up. Only thing is, before I go any further, I would just like to, I was curious to know, why did you select grade 9? Why not 5? Why not 11? Or any particular reason there?
Just because grade 9, at least in Ontario when I grew up, was the time that you really had the scientific method introduced in a formal way.
Okay.
And so, I'm sure different school boards do it differently, but it's elemental, but it's probably not something that you that happens in grade 3.
Okay. So let's wrap it up. So it was great presentation, Hugh. And it has given us different approaches to use tools, techniques. It exposed us to a different way of thinking, the scientific method. It made us familiar with Kata, which most of us were vaguely familiar, though we are familiar with the Kaizen concept. So there are some similarities there. And your examples from Life Lab was great. And thanks for sharing it, how to reduce time, because all of us are experiencing it. All of us have been at some point of time into Life Labs and hated that delay there.
Indeed.
So thank you very much. And thank you everyone who attended this session. It was wonderful. You're a very nice audience. So with this, I hand over to Tracy.
Thank you so much, Santosh. Thank you all for attending this session. We truly hope you enjoyed it. We would love to hear your feedback on this, so please take a few seconds to complete this poll regarding our speaker. Now you have 30 seconds to complete the poll. 10 seconds remaining. 5 seconds remaining. And we're going to close the poll now. So thank you all for participating. The link for the next Zoom session will be inserted in the chat now. So it's our closing and workshop session with Tony Belivosky. The topic, The Adaptive Will Survive, focusing on the right things during these opportune times. Do enjoy the rest of your day.